The night was quiet, but not peaceful. The air carried a kind of tension that people only feel when something is about to go wrong. It was a small town on the edge of a long highway, where a single diner with flickering neon lights stood like a tired sentinel in the dark. Inside, only a handful of people sat, sipping coffee and keeping to themselves. The kind of place where strangers avoided eye contact, and the silence between clinking cups felt heavier than it should. In the far corner sat an old man. His back was slightly bent, his hands rough and scarred, and his eyes carried the weight of years that most people could never imagine. He was a veteran. His jacket still bore a faded patch from his unit, and though he was alone, his presence filled the booth with a quiet dignity. But to many passing eyes, he was just another old man lost in his memories. Keanu Reeves had stopped at the diner by chance. He was traveling quietly, as he often did, preferring solitude over noise. He had come here for nothing more than a late-night cup of coffee and perhaps a few moments of calm. When he entered, people barely looked up. Dressed simply, with his usual quiet humility, he blended in as though he had been a part of this town for years. But Keanu noticed the old man almost immediately. There was something in the way he sat, something unspoken that demanded respect. Then the door burst open. 6 bikers entered the diner, their heavy boots striking against the worn floorboards. Their laughter was loud, careless, and sharp. They filled the space with an energy that shifted the air, turning quiet stillness into uneasy silence. The waitress at the counter froze for a second before forcing a smile. Other customers lowered their eyes, hoping not to be noticed. The bikers didn't come for food, they came for attention. Their leader, a tall man with tattoos running down his arms, glanced around before locking his eyes on the veteran sitting alone. A smirk crossed his face. "Look at this old soldier," he said loudly, enough for everyone to hear. "Still playing hero?" The others laughed, their voices bouncing off the diner's walls. The old man didn't respond. He simply kept his hands folded on the table, his coffee untouched. His silence only seemed to fuel their cruelty. One of the bikers stepped closer to him, knocking against his booth with deliberate force. "Say something, old man. Or are you too broken to speak?" Keanu watched. His fingers tightened around the mug of coffee in his hand. He didn't move yet. He had learned long ago that sometimes silence was stronger than action, at least until the line was crossed. The leader leaned down toward the veteran, his shadow falling across the table. "You fought wars, didn't you? Where's your army now? Who's going to save you tonight?" The veteran finally raised his eyes. They were tired, but they carried a quiet strength. He said nothing. The bikers laughed again, but their laughter wasn't real. It was cruel, meant to provoke. One of them shoved the veteran's coffee cup, spilling it across the table and onto his jacket. The old man flinched but didn't rise. And that was when Keanu stood up. The sound of his chair scraping against the floor cut through the laughter. Every head turned toward him. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even look angry. But his presence changed the room. "That's enough," he said softly. The bikers stared at him, surprised at first, then amused. One of them chuckled. "And who are you supposed to be?" Keanu didn't answer. Instead, he walked over slowly, his calm steps louder than their boots. He stopped beside the veteran's booth and looked at the bikers with eyes that carried something they weren't used to seeing: calm, steady, unshaken. "Leave him alone," Keanu said. The leader grinned, but there was something uneasy in his smile now. The quiet confidence in Keanu's voice carried a weight that none of them could ignore. Still, he leaned closer, testing. "Or what?" the leader asked. For a moment, the whole diner seemed to hold its breath. The veteran's hand trembled slightly on the table, not from fear, but from the years of memories this moment stirred. Keanu placed a gentle hand on the old man's shoulder, steadying him, not with force, but with respect. Then he looked back at the bikers. "You don't want to find out," Keanu said quietly. The room fell silent. Even the hum of the neon light outside seemed to fade, and that was how it began. The diner's air was heavy now, like everyone inside was holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The bikers weren't used to being challenged. People usually looked away, gave them space, pretended not to hear. But Keanu's quiet words had broken that routine, and the sudden silence made their arrogance feel smaller than it had a moment ago. The leader laughed, but it was forced, sharp at the edges. "Listen, stranger, you don't know who you're talking to. We don't back down because someone whispers at us." He leaned back and spread his arms, showing off his size and tattoos, making sure everyone saw. The others followed his lead, chuckling, slapping the counters, trying to regain control of the room. "Yeah," one of them added. "This is none of your business. The old man can speak for himself if he has something to say." Keanu didn't react. His expression stayed calm, almost gentle, but there was steel under it, the kind of steel that made even reckless men pause. He looked at the veteran first, his voice soft enough that only those closest could hear. "Sir, you don't have to prove anything tonight." The veteran's lips trembled slightly. He had seen many battles in his life, but humiliation in his old age cut deeper than any wound. He gave a small nod, like a soldier acknowledging a comrade. Keanu straightened and turned back to the bikers. "You see," he said, "he doesn't need to defend himself. So walk away." The leader's smirk faltered. The quiet conviction in Keanu's voice carried no threat, but it made every word feel final, unshakable. Still, pride is a dangerous thing. "You think you can tell us what to do?" the leader snapped. "You don't know how things work. Respect is earned, not given." Keanu's eyes softened. Respect is always given first. You only lose it when you cross the line. That struck a nerve. The leader's jaw clenched. He wasn't used to being taught lessons, especially not in front of his men. He slammed his hand on the counter, making the plates rattle. "You talk too much," he growled. "Let's see if you can back it up." He stepped forward, towering over Keanu. The diner held its silence tighter. The waitress frozen with a coffee pot still in her hand, another customer gripping his fork without moving. No one wanted this to happen, but no one could stop it either. Keanu didn't flinch. He didn't raise his fists or his voice. Instead, he leaned slightly toward the leader, close enough that only he could hear, and said in a calm, steady tone, "You're not as strong as you think. Strong men don't need to tear others down." For a moment, the leader froze. No one had spoken to him like that before, and deep inside the words stung. But pride drowned out reflection. He shoved Keanu's shoulder hard, expecting him to stumble. Keanu didn't move. He stayed rooted, steady as stone. The shove looked small, almost weak against his stillness. The other bikers laughed nervously, but their laughter cracked. The balance of power was shifting, and they felt it. The leader's face darkened. "You really don't know who you're messing with." The veteran finally spoke, his voice trembling but clear, cutting through the tension. "Son, you don't want to do this." Everyone turned to him. His words carried the weight of age, of battles fought and lives lost. His frail frame didn't hide the strength in his spirit. But the bikers weren't listening. The leader waved dismissively. "Stay out of this, old man." He raised his hand as if to grab Keanu, but before he could, Keanu finally moved. Not with violence, not with anger, but with precision. He caught the man's wrist in one swift motion and held it gently, but firmly enough that the leader couldn't pull away. Keanu's voice was calm, almost a whisper, but the whole diner heard it. "You don't want to cross this line." The leader's eyes widened. It wasn't just the strength in Keanu's grip. It was the control, the calm certainty that he could end this if he chose. The other bikers shifted uneasily, their false bravado cracking under the weight of the moment. One of them muttered, "Hey, maybe we should go." But the leader's pride kept him rooted. The veteran looked at Keanu, his eyes filled with something unspoken, gratitude, but also worry. He knew men like this didn't walk away easily, and that was when the first real twist of the night arrived. A biker near the door suddenly pulled out a chain from his jacket, swinging it slowly, the sound of metal links clinking in the tense air. Maybe we should teach both of them a lesson. The diner gasped. The waitress dropped the coffee pot, shattering it across the floor. Keanu didn't release the leader's wrist. Instead, he calmly shifted his stance, placing himself fully between the veteran and the bikers. His shoulders lowered, his eyes steady, his entire body becoming a quiet wall of resolve. The room was about to change. The chain swung slowly in the biker's hand, catching the dim light from the diner's ceiling lamps. Each clink of metal sounded like a warning, and the air inside thickened with fear. No one moved. No one even dared to breathe too loudly. The veteran pressed his back against the booth, his old hands gripping the edge of the table. He had seen many fights in his life, but this one was different. He wasn't the soldier anymore. He was the man being defended. And that truth cut deep into his pride, even as gratitude filled his heart. Keanu stood between him and the 6 men, his stance quiet, his breathing calm. He didn't posture like a fighter, didn't raise his fists. He looked like a man ready to endure, not a man ready to destroy. And that quiet strength unnerved them more than if he had shouted threats. The leader tried to yank his wrist free, but Keanu's grip held steady. It wasn't crushing, it wasn't violent. It was simply unshakable. Finally, with a sharp twist, Keanu released him, pushing his arm aside just enough to create space. The leader stumbled a step back, angry and embarrassed. "You made a mistake," he growled. The biker with the chain stepped forward, swinging it in a small circle, trying to intimidate. "He's not so tough," he sneered. "Let's see him stop all of us." The customers in the diner exchanged terrified looks. A young couple near the window slid out of their booth quietly, trying to move toward the exit. The waitress froze behind the counter, her lips trembling, torn between calling the police and the fear of making things worse. Keanu's eyes moved slowly from one biker to the next. His voice, when it came, was low and steady. "You still have a choice. Walk out of here, and nothing follows you. Stay, and you'll regret it." The chain whipped through the air with a sharp hiss, aimed at Keanu's shoulder. In a blur, Keanu stepped aside, his hand snapping up to catch the chain mid-swing. The sudden halt made the biker stumble, his arm yanked forward by his own momentum. Keanu held the chain firmly, but not as a weapon. He let it dangle from his hand, then dropped it on the floor with a metallic thud. The sound echoed through the diner like a judge's gavel. "Enough," Keanu said. The biker stepped back, stunned. His pride screamed at him to attack again, but the quiet certainty in Keanu's eyes froze him in place. The leader tried to laugh, but his voice cracked. "You think that scares us? You think you can embarrass us like this?" He motioned to the others, and 2 of them began circling, trying to come at Keanu from different sides. The veteran suddenly spoke, his voice firm despite the tremor in it. "Stop this madness. You don't even know the man you're provoking." The bikers ignored him. One lunged forward, reaching for Keanu's jacket, while the other swung a fist at his side. Keanu moved like water. He sidestepped the grab, guiding the biker's arm away with gentle precision, then leaned just enough to let the punch sail past him harmlessly. In the same motion, he placed a steady hand on the man's back and nudged him forward, sending him stumbling into a booth. The other biker turned, frustrated, but Keanu's calm eyes met his, and for a brief moment, he hesitated. The leader barked angrily. "Don't back down! He's just one man! But one man was all it took. Keanu didn't throw punches. He didn't swing wildly. Every move he made was clean, controlled, purposeful. When another biker charged, Keanu caught him by the jacket and guided him to the ground with a sweep that looked effortless. He stepped back each time, leaving the choice clear. Stay down or stand up and continue. The veteran's chest rose and fell quickly as he watched. This wasn't just fighting. This was restraint. It was strength wrapped in mercy. Finally, the leader lost his patience. With a roar, he rushed forward, fists clenched, swinging hard at Keanu's jaw. Keanu didn't step away this time. He blocked, his arm moving with quiet precision, then shifted his weight and locked the leader's wrist, twisting him down to one knee. The leader let out a cry of pain, not from injury, but from the shock of being overpowered so easily. Keanu leaned close, his voice barely above a whisper. I told you not to cross the line. The diner was silent again. The bikers froze where they stood, their arrogance leaking out like air from a punctured tire. For the first time, doubt filled their eyes. And then, breaking the silence, the sound of police sirens echoed faintly in the distance. Someone must have called. The leader's face twisted with frustration. He spat at the floor, then signaled his men. We're not done, he muttered, pulling himself free. They backed toward the door, their swagger gone, their laughter silenced. One by one, they filed out, their engines roaring to life moments later. The diner exhaled all at once. The waitress dropped to her knees to pick up the broken coffee pot, her hands shaking. The young couple returned to their booth, still holding hands tightly. The veteran looked up at Keanu, his eyes moist. You didn't have to do that, he said softly. Keanu shook his head. Yes, I did. But what no one in that diner knew was that this night wasn't over. The bikers had left, but their pride was wounded, and men like that rarely stayed quiet after humiliation. A storm was waiting just beyond the horizon. The diner settled back into a fragile calm after the bikers left. The sound of their motorcycles fading into the night felt like relief, but it was thin and temporary, like the silence before thunder. People began to whisper again, slowly returning to their meals, though their hands still trembled. The veteran sat quietly, his coffee long gone cold. He stared at the table, the shame of needing protection heavy on his shoulders, yet gratitude lingered in his eyes. Keanu slid back into the booth across from him, his presence grounding, steady like a lighthouse in a storm. They'll come back, the veteran said softly. His voice carried the weight of experience, the kind of knowing that only men who had seen enough violence could speak with. Keanu nodded once. I know. The waitress came over, her hands still shaking as she poured Keanu another cup. Thank you for what you did, she whispered. If you hadn't been here... Her voice broke, and she forced a smile. Keanu offered a quiet nod. Stay calm. If they return, don't get involved. Protect yourself first. His words were gentle, but there was a finality in them. She understood. The hours passed slowly. Customers trickled out until only a few remained. The hum of the neon lights outside buzzed in the silence. The veteran leaned back, exhaustion settling into his bones, but he refused to leave. Deep down, he didn't want to run. Not again. Keanu stayed with him, not because he had to, but because something inside told him this was not finished. And then, just past midnight, the sound returned. The roar of engines cut through the night like thunder rolling over the hills. Headlights flashed through the diner's windows as motorcycles circled outside. The few remaining customers froze. The waitress's face went pale. The bikers were back. This time, they didn't come alone. Instead of 6, there were 10, maybe more. Their engines idled like growling beasts outside, the low rumble vibrating through the floor. The leader's pride had been wounded, and pride always returned with reinforcements. The diner door creaked open. The leader stepped in first, his face hard, his eyes sharp with humiliation turned to rage. Behind him, his men followed, filling the diner until the space felt too small to hold them. The air thickened with danger. The waitress whispered, "Oh, God," under her breath. The leader scanned the room until his gaze locked on Keanu and the veterans sitting together. A smile spread across his face, but it wasn't joy. It was venom. "Thought you could embarrass me?" he said, his voice low, dangerous. "Now we finish this." The veteran straightened, his old pride refusing to let him shrink. But Keanu rose slowly, placing a steady hand on the veteran's shoulder before stepping forward. "You brought more men," Keanu said softly. "That doesn't make you stronger. It only shows how afraid you are." The leader's smile faltered for the briefest moment, but he masked it with a sneer. "Big words. Let's see if you can stand against all of us." He snapped his fingers, and two bikers moved to block the exits. Others spread out, surrounding Keanu like wolves circling prey. The veteran gripped the edge of the booth, his heart pounding. "Keanu," he whispered, but the words stuck in his throat. The leader stepped closer. "Last chance. Walk away now, and maybe we let the old man live out his days in peace." Keanu's jaw tightened. His eyes softened, though, when they flicked to the veteran. Then he looked back at the leader, his voice steady as stone. "You won't touch him. Not tonight. Not ever." The leader's face twisted with fury. He swung, a wild punch aimed straight at Keanu's head. Keanu ducked, moving fluidly, and the punch slammed into the counter instead, knocking over cups and sending dishes crashing to the floor. Chaos erupted. Another biker lunged, grabbing at Keanu's jacket, but Keanu twisted, pulling him forward and using his momentum to send him sprawling onto a table. Wood cracked under the impact. The others roared and rushed in together. Still, there were too many. The small diner was shaking with violence now. Tables overturned, dishes shattered, terrified screams echoing. The waitress crawled behind the counter for safety, clutching her phone to call the police. Through it all, the veteran sat frozen, torn between fear and awe. He had never seen someone fight like this, not with anger, but with precision and restraint. It wasn't just defense, it was control. But the numbers began to press harder. 3 men charged Keanu at once, forcing him back toward the booth where the veteran sat. The leader, waiting for his chance, picked up the fallen chain and swung it viciously toward Keanu's head. This time, Keanu didn't dodge. He raised his arm, catching the chain mid-swing. The impact jolted through his arm, but he held firm. With one smooth motion, he yanked the leader forward, sending him stumbling face first into the counter. The diner shook with the sound of the crash. The other bikers froze for just a second, stunned at how quickly their leader had fallen. And in that second, the sound of sirens cut through the night again, closer this time, louder. Red and blue lights flashed through the diner windows. Panic broke the bikers' fury. They looked at each other, unsure now. Their leader groaned on the floor, trying to rise but failing. Keanu stood tall, breathing steady, his eyes sweeping the room. "It's over," he said quietly. But the leader, even broken and bruised, spat words dripping with venom. "This isn't over. You don't know who we are. You don't know who we answer to." The threat hung in the air, darker than the fight itself. For the first time, Keanu's eyes narrowed. He realized something deeper was at play. These weren't just reckless bikers. They were connected to something larger, something dangerous. And this night was only the beginning. The sirens grew louder until the flashing lights filled the diner windows with red and blue. The bikers froze, caught between fight and flight, their eyes darting to the exits. The leader struggled to his feet, blood running from a cut on his forehead, his pride wounded deeper than his flesh. Two police cars skidded to a stop outside. Doors flew open, and officers rushed in, hands already hovering over their weapons. The sudden authority in the room shifted the air again, like the storm breaking after lightning strikes. "Everybody stay where you are," one officer shouted, his voice firm. The bikers raised their hands, some reluctantly, others with sneers on their faces. They weren't afraid of the police. Not truly. Keanu noticed that in the way they smirked, the way the leader leaned against the counter like he still held the upper hand. The officers began separating people. The waitress pointed shakily toward Keanu and the veteran. He was protecting us," she said, her voice cracking. "They came back. They tried to hurt the old man. He stopped them." One officer gave Keanu a quick glance, recognition flickering across his face, but he said nothing. Instead, he kept his voice professional. "Sir, are you injured?" "No," Keanu said softly. The veteran shook his head as well, though his hands trembled. "I'm fine, because of him." The police started cuffing the bikers, but the leader barked out a laugh. "You don't know who you're messing with," he said, his voice dripping with arrogance. "Call your captain, you'll see." The officers exchanged uneasy glances. Something in his tone carried weight. And then the veteran spoke, his voice low but steady. "He's not lying." All eyes turned to him. The veteran leaned forward, his weathered hands gripping the table. "These men, I've seen their kind before. They're connected, bigger than this little gang you see here. If they're here, then trouble's not far behind." The leader grinned, blood still running down his face. "The old man's smarter than he looks. We don't answer to the law. And your hero here just made enemies he can't even name." Keanu's jaw tightened. He didn't respond, but the words settled deep, like a stone in still water. The officers escorted the bikers outside, loading them into cars. The leader's eyes never left Keanu's. Even as the door closed behind him, he mouthed the words clearly. "This isn't over." The diner grew quieter again, but it wasn't relief this time. It was unease. The waitress whispered, "What does he mean? Who do they work for?" The veteran's gaze darkened, as if old memories were clawing back to the surface. "There are groups, dangerous ones. Men who live in the shadows, feeding off fear. I thought I'd left them behind after the war, but they've grown bolder. And now they've noticed us." Keanu listened carefully. He didn't dismiss the veteran's warning. There was truth in his tone, truth built from years of experience. The officers returned a moment later. "We've got them in custody," one said, "but we were told to release them as soon as we bring them in." The words landed like a blow. "What?" the waitress gasped. "After what they just did?" The officer's face was pale. "Orders came down from higher up. This isn't in our hands anymore." The veteran closed his eyes slowly. "Just like I feared." Keanu's voice was quiet, but it cut through the tension like a blade. "Then they'll be back. Stronger. And not just for me. They'll come for him." He nodded toward the veteran. The room fell into heavy silence. The veteran finally looked at Keanu, his eyes steady despite the fear beneath them. "You could walk away, son. This isn't your burden. You don't owe me anything." Keanu shook his head. "I do. Respect is owed to men like you. I won't let them take it from you." For the first time, the veteran's lips curved into the faintest of smiles, though his eyes glistened. "Then you're a rare man." The night dragged on. The police left, but their presence meant little now. The threat lingered outside, heavy as the storm clouds rolling across the horizon. The veteran knew the danger wasn't just physical, it was bigger, darker, the kind of shadow that swallowed men whole. As dawn began to paint the edges of the sky, Keanu sat quietly, watching the road. The veteran had drifted into a restless sleep in the booth, but Keanu's mind remained sharp. He knew this was no longer about a diner fight. The bikers weren't the real danger. They were messengers, pieces of something larger. And somewhere out there, in the quiet before sunrise, men were already planning the next move. The dawn was gray, heavy with the promise of rain. The diner sat quietly on the edge of the highway, its neon lights buzzing faintly, as if even they were too tired to fight the coming day. Inside, Keanu sat by the window, watching the horizon. His coffee had gone cold, untouched for hours. The veteran slept uneasily in the booth, his head resting against the glass, the years of battles past weighing down his rest. Keanu knew the peace would not last. The leader's words echoed in his mind. This isn't over. Pride could be dangerous, but pride backed by power was worse. The police had shown their weakness, their hands tied by unseen orders. And when justice fails, shadows rise. Just after sunrise, the sound came again. Engines. Many this time. Not just the roar of motorcycles, but heavy trucks and dark cars rolling down the highway toward the diner. The ground trembled beneath them. The waitress looked out the window and gasped. "Oh no. They're back. And they've brought more." The veteran stirred, his old instincts snapping awake. He sat up, eyes narrowing as he peered outside. "That's not just a gang," he whispered. "That's a convoy. They've called in their masters." Keanu rose slowly, his expression calm. "Then this ends here." The first vehicles screeched to a halt outside the diner. Doors slammed. More than 20 men stepped out, leather jackets, heavy chains, and weapons in hand. Their leader emerged from the middle, his forehead still marked by the scar from last night, his pride burning hotter than his pain. He pointed at the diner with a smirk. "Drag them out, both of them." The men began advancing. Inside, the customers who had returned for breakfast froze in terror. Some ducked beneath tables, others looked for a back exit, but 2 bikers were already stationed there. The waitress trembled, clutching her apron. The veteran looked at Keanu, his voice low. "You can't take them all. There are too many." Keanu placed a steady hand on the old man's shoulder. "We don't run, not today." He stepped forward, out into the morning light as the gang surrounded the diner. The air was heavy with the smell of oil, smoke, and arrogance. The leader smirked at Keanu. "You could have walked away," he said, "but now you'll be broken in front of everyone." Keanu's voice was quiet, but it carried across the lot. "You think strength is fear. You think power is numbers, but you don't understand. True strength is standing for someone else, even when you stand alone." The men laughed, but uneasily. There was something in his calm that they couldn't shake. The leader snarled, "Enough talking. Finish him." The mob rushed forward. Keanu moved like a storm. His body flowed with precision, every strike clean, every step measured. He disarmed one man and turned his weapon aside, guiding another's momentum into the ground. His movements weren't wild. They were efficient, almost graceful. The veteran watched from the doorway, his heart pounding. This wasn't just fighting. This was discipline, restraint, and mercy wrapped in one. Keanu never struck harder than he had to. He put men down, but he didn't destroy them. Still, the numbers pressed in. Blows landed. A chain struck his back. A fist grazed his jaw. Keanu staggered for a moment, but his eyes burned with resolve. He rose again, steady as stone, standing tall no matter how many came. Finally, the leader himself stepped forward, armed with a steel pipe. He swung wildly, roaring with anger. Keanu blocked, the pipe slamming into his forearm with a dull crack. Pain shot through him, but he held firm, twisting the leader's wrist and sending the pipe clattering to the ground. The two men stood face to face, breathing hard. The leader sneered, but there was fear in his eyes now. Keanu spoke softly. "This ends when you choose to end it. But if you keep coming, I will stand again, and again, until you understand." The leader's sneer faltered. His men, scattered and bruised, hesitated, looking to him for direction. For the first time, he had no command to give. Silence stretched over the lot. The waitress peeked from the diner doorway, her eyes wide with hope. The veteran stood straighter, pride swelling in his chest. Finally, the leader spat on the ground. "You're not worth it," he muttered. He turned and motioned for his men. "Let's go." One by one, the bikers retreated, climbing back into their trucks and motorcycles. Engines roared, and soon the convoy pulled away, leaving behind only dust and silence. Keanu stood in the middle of the lot, his chest rising and falling slowly. His shirt was torn, his arms bruised, but his spirit unbroken. He turned back toward the diner, where the veteran waited in the doorway. The old man's eyes glistened. "Son," he said softly, "you didn't just protect me. You reminded me what dignity feels like. I thought the world had forgotten it." Keanu gave him a faint, humble smile. No one forgets. Sometimes they just need to see it again. The veteran straightened, his back a little less bent, his pride restored. The waitress stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "You saved all of us," she whispered. Keanu shook his head. "No, I just reminded them that respect matters. The rest is up to all of us." The sun broke through the clouds then, casting the diner in warm light. The storm had passed, but its lesson remained. Respect, humility, resilience, and kindness were stronger than fear. Keanu looked once more at the horizon, then quietly slipped back inside, sitting across from the veteran again. To the outside world, it was just another morning. But for everyone in that diner, it was a day they would never forget.